third of the sun's rays are converted into electricity, and scientists are trying to increase the efficiency of solar cells by increasing the absorbance, so increasing this part of your process, making more light absorbed into the silicon to excite more electrons. So one solution to this problem is the Maser Group's black silicon, where they took really high intensity lasers called femtosecond lasers, which would morph the surface of, which is usually flat silicon, and creates these quasi-order nanocones, which when light hits the surface, they get trapped inside the valleys of the cones, and this would absorb a broader range of wavelengths and reduce reflection to 10%. So here's just a visual comparison of the difference between the two. Here's normal silicon. As you can see, it's very mirror-like, which if you're trying to absorb light, you don't want light to reflect off of it, which is the reason why black silicon appears black, because no light is bouncing off, everything's being trapped inside the cones. So our goal was to mimic this nanocone structure of black silicon, but in a cheaper way without very expensive lasers. So we would deposit a monolayer of spheres on the surface of the silicon, and then chemically etch through them and create these cones. So the first step in our process was to deposit the monolayer of beads. As you can see here, we made a monolayer of silicon microspheres. Here's an AFM image of the spheres, and you can see the order. And then the next thing we did was we put them in an 1100 degree furnace, which would then melt the silica beads to the surface so they all stick together and they wouldn't dissolve when we put on the etching solution. And then so the next step was to put on the etching solution. And here you can still see the beads because it's only 5 minutes into etching, so nothing has really happened yet. It just got a little bit toasty. So on the next slide is full etching, and now it looks totally different. There are no more beads. And this side is the bead section, this is the non-beaded section. And over here there are these pyramid-like structures, which is what usually happens on etched silicon. But when you look at the difference between the two, there are many more pyramidal structures on the beaded sections than in the non-beaded sections, and the non-beaded sections had these white areas that were reflecting more light. And then so we were intrigued by this, and we wanted to know why the beads were, what about the optical properties of the beads were changing. So we did a backscattering test where we shone a green light laser onto all of our samples and then looked at the reflection on a white background. And so this left column is just normal silicon. Starts out as like a normal beam of light, and then as you go down after etching, it gets a little bit dispersed, but there's still this strong focus. But then on our beaded samples, it looks a little different. There's sort of like a circular pattern. And then after you etch, it gets completely dispersed, and there's an even dispersing of light, which means that it has a much rougher surface in the nanoscale. So we morphed the surface of the beads significantly as you compare these two. This one has a strong focus, and this one's completely dispersed. So our conclusions were that although we didn't create the nanocones we thought we would, we created these pyramids that work just as well, where even though normalized silicon is something that scientists use for like highly absorbent solar cells than normal ones, but we were able to create more pyramidal structures, which would be like making a super etched silicon, and then because that disperses the light more evenly. So our data suggests that adding silica microspheres prior to etching may enhance the efficiency of the etched silicon. Thanks to these guys, and thanks to you.